So why are property taxes such a big deal in Illinois? If you live in Illinois, like I do, property taxes are probably one of the more noticeable bills that you happen to get, one of the more noticeable taxes that you have to pay, because you get your tax bill each year, and they're impactful to homeowners, of course. They also affect renters because of housing costs that can increase. Businesses, of course, are impacted, and property taxes really can shape how people feel about whether they can afford to stay in their community or not. And so the civics question came down to this. This was an important one I thought we could look at from a local or state perspective, and that is, why are property taxes such a big deal in Illinois? Well, the first thing that we need to understand is that property taxes in Illinois are mostly local. They're just not simply a tax that's handed down from Springfield. In Illinois, property taxes are imposed by local taxing districts like school districts, counties, municipalities, townships, park districts, library districts, and fire protection districts, and you may have others as well. And that's one reason why your tax bill can feel so complicated, because you're not just paying the taxes to one they don't go to one government, they go to several. And Illinois has a lot of local governments, and that's important because each local taxing body may have its own budget, its own board, its own levy that it puts through, and its own public meetings. And the second reason would be property taxes, why they matter so much, is because it's the way that it funds our public schools. In many Illinois communities, the largest part of the property tax bill goes to the public school district. Now, that doesn't mean schools are the only cause of high property taxes, but it does mean that school funding and property taxes are deeply connected. They are tied together. So in a state, we have a state right now, Illinois, the state relies heavily on local property wealth in order to fund schools. And that means wealthier areas can raise more money more easily, while poorer areas may need higher tax rates just to provide basic services. And Illinois has tried to address this through evidence-based funding, which sends more state money to districts based on need. But property taxes still remain a major part of how local schools are funded. Now, there's a third reason here as well, and that third reason is local control. People often say they want local control, and that really makes sense because local communities know their own needs. But local control also means local cost. So if residents want schools and roads and libraries and parks and ambulances and fire protection and police protection and other services, those services have to be funded somehow. And in Illinois, much of that funding, well, it comes from property taxes. And we end up with in some cases, there are some limits in some places. There is the property tax extension limitation law that's usually known as PTEL. And it limits how much many non-home rule taxing districts can increase total property tax extensions each year. But a limit on growth is not the same thing as a low tax bill. So when people ask why property taxes are such a big deal in Illinois, the answer is not just this. There's not one simple bad guy. We just can't find the villain. The problem really comes down to it as a system. That's the problem, because Illinois has so many local governments. And that means, like I said, schools rely heavily on local property taxes. Local services cost money. So that means that state funding choices are really important. But also local control, local boards are really matter. But also we need to look at things like assessment practices, those things where they determine how much your property is worth and what rate it'll be taxed at. And voters often don't know which district is responsible for which part of their tax bill. And I think that's where it can come back down to it being a civics lesson, because if people want property tax reform, they need to understand where the bill actually comes from. Now, through all this, right, Springfield is important. Springfield matters, and a lot of folks are laying the blame at Governor Pritzker's feet. But in addition to Springfield, we also need to be looking at school boards, county boards, township officials, assessors, any tax referenda that come through, and also local budgets. So why are property taxes such a big deal in Illinois? Well, because they're where local government becomes very personal. Because property taxes connect you to your home. They connect your home and then also your schools and your public services and your community, and those are all connected with your wallet. And this is one of those things that probably doesn't get addressed really well in a classroom setting, because we spend so much time focusing on the federal government, national government. But this is another example of where local government really hits closer to home. And so it probably doesn't quite get the attention that it needs to in the classroom. And hey, as a government and civics teacher, it's part of my job, part of my responsibility to make sure that I do a better job of presenting this in the classroom, but also sharing it here with you. So if you wouldn't mind sharing this with other folks, and maybe we can get a discussion going on why property taxes are so important. Thanks for your time today.